Today's date is August 20th, 2003. This is the New Westminster Sports Oral History Project, and today's interviewee is Stan Stewardson. So Stan, what is your full name?
Stanley Allen Stewardson.
And please tell me your date and place of birth.
New Westminster, BC, October 27th, 1938.
And your marital status?
I'm married. I've been married for 40 years. My wife, Heather, and I have 3 children.
Do you have any grandchildren?
I have 2 grandchildren.
Ah. So where were your parents from?
My parents, my mother originally was born in, both my parents were born in New Westminster. But my mother's background is Icelandic and Danish. And my father's background is English.
All right. And so obviously you've always been a New Westminster resident. Is that right?
Well, that's basically true. I've lived in a lot of other places. I taught a year in Trail in Rossland, and I've lived in Surrey, and I've lived in Delta.
Okay. Could you tell me your current address?
912 Jackson Crescent, New Westminster.
All right, getting right into the sports part. How old were you when you first began playing sports?
8 years old.
And what was...
I played lacrosse for a team called East End. It was a New Westminster minor lacrosse league team, and I played lacrosse for 1 year.
1 year. And then what other sort of sports did you begin to get involved with?
I got involved with softball when I was 11, and played for an East End team coached by Jack Cowie. And following that, Little League Baseball started in New Westminster when I was 12 years old.
Right. How did Little League Baseball begin?
I don't really know how Little League Baseball started, other than the fact that there was a group of individuals who knew of Little League Baseball, and they decided to bring it to New Westminster. And they had a meeting, and there was an awful lot of people involved initially, and Little League Baseball just seemed to fit right into New Westminster because of so many active athletes who weren't really involved with anything else.
And so you just began playing? Were your parents involved with it?
My dad was. My dad actually donated the first trophy for Little League Baseball. He was quite active in Little League. Mostly as a parent, but also as an executive individual who wanted to see baseball flourish in New Westminster. My first recollections of Little League Baseball was when a photographer came to my house from the British Columbia newspaper and took a picture of my dad and my brother and myself in a Little League Baseball pose to introduce Little League Baseball to New Westminster. And then there was a write-up in the paper, and following that, there was meetings, and Little League Baseball began.
Did it just take off? Was it popular?
It was. It was very popular. I mean, there were 2 teams in New Westminster, and there could have probably been 4.
Oh, really?
But they started off with 2 teams in New Westminster, and then 1 in Whalley and 1 in Millardville. And the interesting thing about Little League Baseball is that Little League Baseball didn't begin in Moody Park. Little League Baseball began in Queen's Park. Right behind the arena where the tennis courts are located now. That was the first Little League Baseball diamond before the Little League Baseball diamond was built over in Moody Park.
Okay, did you play in both parks?
No, I didn't. I only played in the one park, and that was in Queen's Park. I only played for 1 year, and my brother played for 3 years, but I only played for 1 year.
What position did you play?
I was mainly a pitcher, first baseman at that particular time.
Right. And did you continue in your baseball career?
Right, and I pitched a fair amount throughout my life, but I also played shortstop. I was probably better a hitter than I was a pitcher.
Right. And so after Little League, did New Westminster have anything else to offer after that? Or
Yes, it did. Actually, another league started immediately following that year, and it was called Little Bigger League Baseball, and it was played in Queen's Park, and it was regulation-sized bases and diamond and so forth, and it was for 13 to 15-year-olds.
And you played in that too?
I did. I played in that league for 2 years, and then I personally went to Vancouver and played in another league, which was called the Junior Pacific Coast League.
Right. And did you go over there because it was more competitive, or what was the reason to go to Vancouver?
Well, actually, there wasn't a follow-up league to go to in New Westminster at that particular time. I could have played one more year in the little bigger league, but I decided to go into Vancouver. It was a more competitive league, and it did involve virtually all of the good athletes in Vancouver.
Oh, okay.
An awful lot of players from that league signed pro contracts from that league as well.
Right. And so was it a semi-pro league then?
No, that wasn't a semi-pro league. No, that was just a youth league, and we played in Riley Park in Vancouver, and then every weekend we played in Capilano Stadium. Capilano Stadium, is now the home of the pro team in Vancouver.
The Canadians.
Canadians.
Right. Okay. So describe to me sort of from there your involvement in baseball in a sort of semi-chronological order, if you can.
Okay, following playing in Vancouver, I played there for 1 year, and then I went to Millardville, which was a senior amateur league. It was called the Dudney League, and I played there when I was 16, and continued to play in the Dudney League with Millardville, and then Vancouver Dufferin Hotel for 4 years. And I was picked up by the Bellingham Bells, which is a semi-pro team, Bellingham, Washington, and I played there for a year and a half. I was lucky enough to play against some outstanding baseball players down there, many of them who went on to become major league stars. I was also lucky enough to be a most valuable player in the Northwest Semi-Pro League, which included teams throughout Washington State.
So that must have been an honor.
It was an honor.
Yeah. And so, and was that sort of the end of your baseball career?
Well, not really, but I went to. I played with Vancouver Dufferin Hotel for another year after that, and then I went to Trail in Rosslyn to teach, and played in the league in the Kootenays for another for 1 year, and then came down and played in New Westminster with their senior team for 2 years, and then I was into coaching.
Then you're into coaching.
Also, baseball-wise, I continued on in baseball, was appointed a scout in Northwest Scout for the Washington Senators, who then became the Texas Rangers in 1970, and worked for a fella out of San Jose by the name of Patty Cottrell. Patty Cottrell was one of the outstanding scouts with the Yankees in the early days, and had a lot to do with a number of the big-time Yankee players signing with the New York Yankees.
Right. So, I mean, even from Little League, was there players out here who had sort of the potential needed for playing pro baseball?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
And did people do that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't well scouted at that particular time by Major League Baseball at all.
Right.
Oh yeah, there were players during my era of playing who signed pro contracts. Very, very few of them ever went to the major leagues. But some players signed. I had the opportunity of signing 3 times with 3 different organizations. But my schooling, and I wanted to be a coach. My schooling was important, and the period in time in which I was asked to sign pro contracts was during later in my university career, and so I didn't choose to do that.
Right. So you've mentioned teaching. So where did you go to school for that?
I went to University of British Columbia.
Right.
I also played baseball at University of British Columbia for Frank Knupp, who was a classic. I mean, one of the outstanding coaches. baseball coaches. He was a football coach at UBC who chose to coach the baseball team, and always intimated to all of us who played for him that he liked baseball better than he liked football.
Oh yeah.
But he was just a classic individual. He was my faculty advisor out at UBC, and he arranged for me to sign a pro contract with the New York Mets if I wanted to, and he was first class individual, and a book about him is long overdue.
Oh really? Tell me a little bit about some other sports that you were involved in. I mean, it wasn't just baseball, was it, at a young age?
No, I played. Got it. No, I played other sports. I was involved with soccer at a young age, and played a lot of soccer. Finishing up with the UBC Thunderbirds in the first division, and I was involved in lacrosse. I played lacrosse when I was 8, and then I didn't play again until I was 17 or 18 years old, and played with the Junior Sandbellies. Had the opportunity of playing for a Canadian championship at that time. We lost to Brampton in Brampton, but we had an outstanding team. The team won the following year.
Okay.
And I was involved with other things, other sports. Probably the sport which I really enjoyed football. I played football in high school. Played a little bit of rugby in high school and a little bit of track and field.
Mm. And so you're, I mean, a general sports enthusiast.
That's right. Sports was my whole life.
How did you juggle all these sports and go to university?
Well, it wasn't easy, because every season I was playing a different sport. Now, I know that at a fairly early age, I was also involved in hockey, but my parents didn't want me to play hockey, and I don't think they were really keen about getting up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning to take me to practice. But I always enjoyed watching hockey and so forth. But no, I think that that every season I would play at least one sport. In the summers I played lacrosse and baseball, and that was the most difficult time of juggling, because one night I was playing baseball, one night playing lacrosse, and during that period of time I would lose about 20 pounds during that season.
I bet. So summer was the big
push. Soccer in the winter, in later life, and baseball and lacrosse in the summer.
Now, you've mentioned in a preliminary interview a little bit about basketball. How did you get involved with basketball?
Well, I didn't play basketball until junior high school, and I didn't play well. I wasn't a great basketball player, but I did play basketball during that period of time. And then I played high school basketball, and was fortunate enough to be about the last person on the team that won the BC championship in 1956. But I don't consider basketball as one of the better sports I've played. I played at basketball, and enjoyed it while I played it, and really enjoyed the people I played with. But basketball became the choice for me to coach, because I believe it posed the greatest challenge in high school.
Oh, okay.
There was more. Basketball was the premier sport in BC in the high schools, and so I chose basketball to coach and to really dedicate most of my life to, as far as my teaching career was concerned, and then further went on to coach basketball at Simon Fraser University.
Right. So you coached high school basketball first, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Right. And where was that?
First of all, I coached high school basketball in Rossland, but previous to that, I coached some basketball at the New Westminster Recreation Association with Al Thiessen and Ken Winslade, and we developed a fairly good program in New Westminster for 10-year-olds to 13-year-olds. And then I coached during that period of time, and then I also coached a little bit of basketball out at UBC, along with coaching a little bit of soccer. And then my first basketball coaching job in high school was in Rossland, my first year teaching After Roslyn, I went to North Delta and coached for 9 years at North Delta.
Oh, okay. And when you were you a phys ed teacher then?
Yes, I was.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so was that coaching basketball in high school? Is that sort of a side job?
That's correct.
Volunteer type thing?
Volunteer
Right.
job.
Right. But it must have been almost full time even then, hey?
Well, it was full time. I mean, if you were going to be successful, you had to put in a lot of time. And we pretty well had our basketball program going year round at North Delta.
Oh, you did?
Mm-hmm.
And was it successful?
It was. We won BC Championship in 1971. The previous year we came sixth. In 1972 we came second. In 1973 we came third. That was in the province, and that was with well over 100 teams we competed against.
So, from what I understand, before it was really New Westminster that was good at basketball. Is that right? That was winning the championships. Duke of Connaught and Trap Tech. Is that right?
Well, that's right. I mean, Duke of Connaught, Trap Tech, Lester Pearson, up until '56. I think that was the last championship that New Westminster won. I was involved with the '56 team, and then I had the opportunity. I believe I'm still the only person who has ever played on and coached a BC high school championship basketball team.
Oh, really? Really? That must have been exciting.
Right. Well, as I say, that I wasn't a great contributing member of the '56 team, but I did coach the '71 team.
Right. From there, from what I understand, you went to Simon Fraser. Is
Correct.
that right?
That's right.
And that was with basketball as well.
That's right.
Right.
I was full-time basketball coach.
Full-time basketball.
Right.
So that's a paid position.
Yes,
then.
it was.
Yeah. How did you make that jump from high school to Simon Fraser?
Well, it didn't seem to be too difficult a jump. I was up at Simon Fraser for a year with John Kutnikoff, who was the head basketball coach at Simon Fraser, as an assistant coach. I was teaching during the day and going up there as soon as school ended to Simon Fraser, and I did that for a year, and then John Kutnikoff resigned, and I was asked to apply for the job, and I got the job. And so then I left teaching high school and went to Simon Fraser full time.
Right. And that was just sort of a move up in your career, I guess. Or...
Right. And it was a challenge. I mean, it was a challenge. We only played against pretty well U.S. schools, and it was a difficult challenge. It wasn't easy, and we were playing against schools who regularly paid players, and that we found out later, and we had a great deal of difficulty in our league at the beginning, but there was a lot of success at Simon Fraser as well.
Right. What sort of successes were there?
Well, we at one time my first stint at Simon Fraser in 1977, we toured Australia, beat the Australian national team in Australia in Melbourne. We beat Athletes in Action, which was a team made up of professional players who toured the United States and Canada and played against various teams. At that particular time, I was also involved with 6 national team players on the one team. We had a very, very strong team. Never able to compete for the Canadian Championship because we were in another league. We were in a U.S. league, and so therefore we could not compete for the Canadian Championship. But there's no doubt in my mind that if we were able to compete for the Canadian Championship at that time, we would have easily won the Canadian Championship. Really? And maybe that's perhaps, that might sound like boasting, but at that particular time, the starting 2 guards on the Canadian national team were both at Simon Fraser at that time, and we had excellent teams. Really?
Yeah. And so what sort of pressures? What was the process of getting a team getting a losing team to being a winning team?
Everything had to do with recruiting. You had to be a recruiter. You had to go out and convince players to come to your school, the best players in Canada. And to me, the ultimate success perhaps was Jay Triano. Jay Triano is presently the coach of the national basketball team. Last year was was an assistant coach with the Toronto Raptors. But Jay, I convinced Jay to come to Simon Fraser. He lived in Niagara Falls, Ontario, and previous to that, Tom Skurlak from Welland, Ontario. And then the following year, Steve Atkin from Ontario. All three were national team players. And all of them came to Simon Fraser based on the fact that we had a scholarship program, and that we were able to offer our athletes the opportunity to play basketball at a higher level than it was played anywhere else in Canada.
And so you would you personally have to go to these different places, or would you be sending scouts? Or?
No, I personally went to all those places.
Yeah.
I would spend 3 weeks to a month in Ontario every year,
really?
Recruiting players. And over the course of my time at Simon Fraser, I recruited approximately 20 players from Ontario.
Right. And was Ontario sort of the place to recruit?
That's right.
Yeah.
It was.
Right. So how did your coaching career at SFU finish then?
Well, I finished. I was coaching at Simon Fraser from 1974 to 1979. At that particular time, I decided I wanted to take a year off from coaching, and then I extended that year to 5 years. And so I took off 5 years at that time. And then the team that subsequently I came back to coach had only won 4 games and lost 26 the year before, and I was asked to come back, and I went back, and I went back for a further 5 years. And during that period of time, we won more games at Simon Fraser than any other Simon Fraser team had ever won.
Oh, really? So it was very successful.
It was.
Yeah.
Once again, it was all to do with recruiting and getting the best basketball players in the province to play at Simon Fraser, and from Ontario as well. We also had a number of players who came to Simon Fraser from the States, and but the most successful players, we were able to get the best players in the province of BC during that period of time, and that was what made it successful.
Oh, I see. Right. So after that, did you teach at SFU as well? Or?
I taught for my first year at Simon Fraser, and then I opted not to teach after that.
Right.
I opted not to teach because I was running camps, and the camps that I was running would be at the same time when I'd be teaching.
Oh, so it conflict then.
Right.
Yeah. So after your basketball sort of coaching career there, were you still involved in sports at SFU?
No, not really. Other than the fact that I helped for a few years in scouting and looking at other teams and relaying information to the new coaches.
And so you basically retired then?
That's correct. I did.
Right. And have you worked anywhere else since then, or was that really a retirement?
No, that was my retirement, and I haven't worked anywhere else full time, other than the fact that I have been involved with real estate for quite a number of years, just buying and selling houses.
Oh, I see.
Buying, fixing up, selling.
Oh, it keeps you busy. Good. Now, I understand also that you knew Terry Fox. Is that
did.
Right? So how would you have had a relationship with him?
Terry Fox, I didn't recruit Terry Fox. Terry Fox came to Simon Fraser as a walk-on. A walk-on is a person who just decides he wants to come to Simon Fraser. Terry Fox came to Simon Fraser and tried out for our basketball team. And he was a member of our junior varsity basketball team at Simon Fraser at that time. And I knew Terry quite well. I really liked the way Terry played, and we actually cut a player who was on scholarship to keep Terry around in the program.
Oh, really?
At that particular time, Terry was exceptional individual. He didn't become an exceptional individual after he got cancer. He was an exceptional individual long before he had cancer. And I knew him during that period of time where he would dive on the floor for loose balls. He would do anything to win. He was an all-out player who played at 100% all the time. And I really enjoyed interacting with Terry at that time. Though I didn't coach him, he was in our program, and he probably would have been a very valuable member of our varsity teams in the future. But at that particular time, during his first year at Simon Fraser, he developed a knee injury of some description. I'm not sure whether it had anything to do with basketball or not, but I know that he was diagnosed with cancer, went into the hospital, and had his leg removed. And we were very involved with him at that time as well. Terry never complained. We never saw him when he was down. He was always upbeat. As basketball team, all of our players visited him. We arranged a basketball game in his honor. We gave him a camera at that time, and what I was most proud of was the fact that our players took time out from their studies and from their other activities to go and visit him while he was in the hospital.
Right. Sounds like he was well liked then.
He was well liked. He was a tremendously well liked individual who every player realized that he gave everything he had every time he went on the floor.
Mm-hmm. And so was SFU involved in his sort of trek across Canada and all the media that went on and sort of the exposure that he brought to cancer and things like that?
Indirectly, because Terry decided that when he decided he was going to run across Canada, he trained at Simon Fraser. He was still a student there.
Okay.
He was going to be our manager the following year, and came into my office one day and informed me that he was not going to be able to manage that year because he had decided that he wanted to do something to raise money for cancer, and that was to run across Canada. And I said to him at that time, I said good luck and so forth. I immediately phoned my parents, who were one of the first people to donate to his cause.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then I guess the relationship continued until his death. Is that right?
Well, it did. I was involved to a certain degree with Terry. In fact, I saw him just a few weeks before he died at his house. I visited him there, and we had a good talk, and he was well aware of what was going to occur, I believe, and
oh, really? Yeah.
And Terry just was a special individual, which all of Canada knows about, and everything that people talk about with regard to him was so true. I mean, Terry was just an exceptional individual, and though not a great athlete, knew how to use every ounce of everything he had to play the games in which he played.
Okay, let's get back a little bit. When you played, for instance, Little League at the age of 11, what were the facilities like up here at Queen's Park?
Well, what I remember was every coach who was involved with Little League, and the two people who were involved with my particular team, which was the Red Sox, Frank Brandolini and I can't remember his first name. Keith Arnold's father would go over about an hour before games and line the field with lime. I believe that they had their own bases and would put the bases down. I know that the umpires were all volunteers, the coaches were all volunteers, and they put in a tremendous amount of time in setting up the diamond, which was rough, and which was just a makeshift diamond at that particular time. But it certainly was a facility in which all of us kids enjoyed playing on, because what we played on before was just Spencer School Grounds, which was rocks and dirt and so forth. And here was people who went out and actually took the rocks off the infield and tried to groom a field so that we could play on.
Mm-hmm. And well, so it sounds like it was a real sort of community affair.
It was a community affair. It certainly was. And I know that there were a lot of people who came out to watch Little League games.
Oh, there were.
I was amazed at the number of people who were there. It was like people were all down the left field line and down the right field line and standing up at the back and in their cars and so forth. There was a lot of people there who watched those games. It was something to do on a nice summer night, and that was about all there was as far as baseball was concerned in the city at that particular time.
Well, there was softball.
There was softball at Moody Park.
At Moody Park,
Right.
right. And then as you moved through, as you grew older and played here in New Westminster, did you still play at that park, or did you play around?
No, I played at Queen's Park.
And was that a better facility there?
Oh yes, it was. It was a groomed facility, and you had the parks officials who looked after the field and watered the field, and no, it was a very nice facility.
Right. And as you moved out of Little League within a year, still have good audiences, the community coming to watch, or was it more family and friends?
Family and friends, mainly at the next level. I think a lot of people came out because Little League got a fair amount of publicity in the British Columbia newspaper, and our particular league, little bigger league, following years didn't get as much publicity, so we probably had mostly following of family and friends.
Oh, okay. And then also, I mean, in the other sports you played, in basketball, for instance, which high school did you go to?
I went to Duke of Connaught High School, and then I was in the first graduating class of Lester Pearson in 1956.
Okay. And so Duke of Connaught, did they have their own gym for basketball?
No, they played at the YMCA, which was across the street. There was no gym at Connaught, and the Y is where we practiced and mostly played up at the junior high school at the site of the new Westminster Junior High School.
Right. And then when you moved to Lester Pearson, they must have had a gym.
Great gym.
Yeah.
Great gym, great facility. Yes. And as I say, I played there in grade 12 and grade 13. Grade 13 year, there was a number of us who played 5 sports, and
5 sports.
5 sports that year, and it was just a great year. It was a fun year. I'll always look back fondly on my grade 13 year for a number of reasons, but one of them was the fact that I played 5 sports, but the other reason was that I had an outstanding teacher in Murdo McDonald who taught me English, and he was the main reason why I was able to be successful at university.
Oh, really? So a lot happened in grade 13.
It did.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. So you must have, the 5 sports, that one of them would have been junior salmon bellies then.
Well,
right?
actually, that was a 6th sport because that was outside the school. I played rugby. I played rugby and soccer, track and field, basketball, and baseball.
Right.
And baseball was in the high school.
Oh, it was. So you played high school baseball.
Right.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So any sort of prominent names while you were in high school that stick out that you played with, or that in the high schools while you were there?
Oh, sure. There was Don Krigo. The year we won the British Columbia basketball tournament, Don Krigo was the most valuable player. Ken Winslade was the first All-Star. Dave McDonald was a second-team All-Star that year and the first-team All-Star the following year. They were excellent basketball players. There was a number of very good friend of mine, Dick Gillespie, was a very good player. He played on the Trap Tech team that won in 1955, and then on the team that won in 1956. And he was also I also started Little League baseball with Dick.
Oh yeah.
And Dick subsequently, when he finished high school, joined the Air Force and stayed in the Air Force for 25 years, I believe, and is retired in Nova Scotia.
Huh. And you've mentioned that basketball is like the premier sport for high schools. Mm-hmm. So what would the audience have been like, for your championship game, for instance?
Well, for championship game, it was overflow crowd at UBC. UBC War Memorial Gym was where we played the high school championships, and there was standing room only. I mean, so I don't know how many people it held, but I'm sure that there was 4,000 or 5,000 people there.
Really?
At that particular time. When my team won in 1971, we played at Pacific Coliseum in front of 12,000 people.
Really? Really? And would you have, like, halftime breaks, or, I mean, I know it's quarters in basketball, but would you have shows and things like that?
Oh, sure. Cheerleaders cheering and
Really?
different groups dancing and so forth. Oh, yes. It was quite a spectacle. The high school basketball was by far the best spectator sport in high school, and it carried on today, right up until today.
Right.
It's the best followed sport in high school.
In high school, right. You've mentioned a bunch of different sort of memorable events that stick out in your mind. You've mentioned things like, the BC Championships, things like that. Anything else about playing sports that really has made an impact on you?
Well, I think that New Westminster, being called the City of Champions, is quite true. I cannot believe the number of people who were involved in my life in New Westminster who had an impact on me. I mean, some of the teachers at the high school, and I'd like to mention specifically Bill Kushner, because Bill Kushner was probably the most influential individual who led me into getting into coaching, because I just really appreciated the way he approached sport and his philosophy with regard to athletics and how he coached and so forth. And if there was one person who I wanted to emulate when I was out coaching, it was him.
Okay.
But Bill Popovich, Rudy Wiley, they were all very influential as well in high school and high school basketball. But there were so many people in the community who did so many things. I mean, all of the coaches I had were volunteers. In lacrosse, I remember Harry Preston and Jake Trotzik in junior lacrosse. But Chick Anderson, I mean, he was just an outstanding individual in minor lacrosse in town. But there were so many. I mean, Frank Brandolini, right up until the time he died, was involved with baseball in New Westminster, and he did so much for baseball, and people like Jack Cowie, who was involved in softball. He was involved in soccer, and he was involved in later with the Salmon Bellies lacrosse team. He volunteered his whole life in New Westminster for teams. But throughout the whole city of New Westminster, the volunteerism that went on with coaching was just outstanding.
It sounds like pretty much everybody had to be involved in some way or another.
Well, there was a lot of people involved.
Yeah.
It was a great city to grow up in. It was a great city to be involved in athletics in. It was small enough that they had their own newspaper, and so you got a little bit of publicity through that, and the teams that New Westminster had in softball and lacrosse and soccer. I mean, my dad had the opportunity of playing with New Westminster Royals, and he played basketball in the city of New Westminster, and he just raves about growing up in New Westminster as well.
Yeah. And he just remembers the crowds and the people involved and all that sort of stuff.
I mean, I have postcards. I have postcards showing 10,000 people at field lacrosse games in New Westminster, and we're talking in the early 1900s.
Right, 10,000.
10,000 people at Queen's Park watching a lacrosse game. No, there wasn't even 10,000 people in the city of New Westminster at that time. But New Westminster's always been that way. I mean, they have always backed their athletes, and they've always had great facilities, and they've always had great coaches, and subsequently, I think a lot of very good individuals have gone on to represent New Westminster. I know that in the days of professional hockey, when Kenny McKenzie had his old New Westminster Royals, the New Westminster Royals were active in the community. I mean, those players were active in the community. They were out talking to people. I mean, they were encouraging people at that time to participate and play in sports.
Yeah, it sounds like, I mean, when sports is such a big part of the city, that you can't help but being sort of involved in some way.
Right.
What did you enjoy most about sports? I know that's a real general question.
Well, competitiveness. I enjoyed competing. Later on, I enjoyed the recruiting part. Other than the fact that I didn't really enjoy recruiting. Other than the fact that it was a great thrill to be able to get a top player to play for you. But I enjoyed competing in sports and just having the involvement of coaching. I will never forget the opportunity I had in coaching lacrosse in 1994 with New Westminster team, which is the last team that won a Canadian championship in lacrosse, and we won the Minto Cup. And my son was the captain of the team, and it was a tremendous thrill to be able to compete and to be able to get these kids to compete for you as a coach. It was certainly a thrill for me because I've been involved with so many other people's kids. I hadn't really been involved with my own kids.
Yeah.
And here was the opportunity to be involved with my own son, and to have won a championship like that was a tremendous thrill.
Yeah, I bet. And so is it fair to say that you really, your coaching was more sort of a thrill for you than playing?
It was. I would honestly have to say that, though I love playing, but I honestly believe that coaching was the ultimate for me.
It was.
I really enjoyed the coaching. It was something which I look forward to, and I could hardly wait to be involved. Of course, games were always so much more fun than practices, but I could hardly wait for games and lived for games in which I could coach.
Really, really. Tell me a little bit about some friendships that have been formed. I mean, you mentioned a few people, but tell me a little more about some of the friendships that you've got because of being involved in sports.
Well, virtually every friend that I have, was because of sports.
It was.
We have at the present day a walking group, which is made up of graduates from 1956 from Lester Pearson High School, 1956. Involved in that group is Ken Winsley, who I first got to know Ken playing softball against him. He played for West End, I played for East End. We played basketball together, and we've been friends, since we were 11, 12 years old. Another very close friend of mine is Al Clark, who I played soccer against and then played soccer with, went to university with, taught with at North Delta, and that was through sports. Granger Cowie, who's been a lifelong friend of mine, we played soccer and lacrosse together, and virtually all of my friends. Ron Rebagliati played basketball with in high school, and played basketball with following high school, and so forth. All of my friends virtually are people who've been involved in sports. A lot of my friends today were people I coached, and so I just 2 weeks ago I was at a reunion. The basketball team I coached in Rosslyn had a 40th reunion.
Really?
And we had one player who died when he was 28 years old, but every player except one was there from that particular team, and that was 40 years ago. And there were, some of them I have seen, in the meantime, but there was still 5 or 6 of those, 6 of those players I hadn't seen in 40 years.
Really?
And it was fantastic. It was just outstanding. And these at that particular time, I was only 5, 6 years older than these players.
Right.
At that time, and for them to have had this 40th reunion was a tremendous thrill for me.
Yeah. So it sounds like some real strong bonds. Yeah, no doubt about that. So in terms of meaning and skills and discipline, all those sorts of things, how has sports impacted you?
Well, philosophically, I've always been a great believer in the fact that, as a coach, you've got to be a person for every player. You cannot be the same way for every single person. You can't treat everybody exactly the same. I've always said that some people need a kick in the butt, others need a pat on the back. But I think that it goes way further than that. The main key for me was that I always wanted players to play on the same page. I always wanted to get every player to love each other and to have a passion for what they're doing and have a passion for each other and to be able to play as a team. I didn't ever like really coaching individual sports. I really enjoyed team sports. I really enjoyed coaching team sports. And this was my ultimate goal, was for the team to really like each other, to play for each other, to work as hard as they can, and to really believe in each other, and to be on the same page as the coach.
Oh, good. Just a last question here. Sports in New Westminster, I mean, it's been around for years and years and years. Do you think it's still important to New Westminster and the community?
Well, I do. Yes, I certainly do. I really think that New Westminster misses one thing. New Westminster misses a daily newspaper. And a daily newspaper would keep people up to date on so many things. I mean, the headlines that the Salmon Bellies used to get, the headlines that Russ Briscoe and his teams used to get in softball with Gordie Hartley and Buddy Leak and all these other players and so forth, was something that really is missed in New Westminster. When the Columbian newspaper left, I think it left a huge hole in the sports community, because the sporting pages in the Columbian newspaper were always filled with the achievements of the athletes who were a part of New Westminster. And I don't think that those are recognized very much at all today.
Right.
Not that you have to have your name in the paper, but the fact that people would be able to follow at sports and so forth. I mean, you go to a lacrosse game today and you might see 150 people. Back in the 60s, there'd be 4,000 and 5,000 people.
Right. Big difference.
Big difference.
Yeah. And a lot of that, I'd imagine, less exposure, right? No.
I think so.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's about it. Is there anything you feel I might have missed that you'd like to add?
No, I don't think so. I think that if anything, if anything that should be added is the fact that I just can't say enough about the volunteerism of the people in New Westminster when I was growing up, and the fact that I probably became a much better person because the fact that I had so many people to look up to and who set examples for me, and this was hopefully one of the things that I attempted to do in my coaching career as well.
Good. Well, thank you.
Okay.